Right, what's up, Dragon Brood? We're back with more decks, and I want to go ahead and say up front, if you haven't subscribed, you should do that. If you haven't hit the like button, I know you're going to like this video because you're here because you want to learn about more decks. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you see all the other stuff. We will still be doing our things you should craft, things you shouldn't craft, other strategy stuff leading up to Duskmourn. It's going to be a busy weekend for me making content. That's what I'm saying, so don't miss that. But anyway, we're getting into this deck. It's going to be a Gruul Surprise deck. Now, don't be wrong, we've seen this before, but there are so many new cards that go into this list. I also want to give a shout out to Yeoman 5 because there was a card that almost slipped under my radar that actually works really good in this list, and we'll talk about it here in a second. But we're going to start with Calamity Galloping Inferno. This card's actually really sweet. It can let us copy, most importantly, the Overlords, and we'll talk about those in a second, because they happen to not be legendary, and they both have, or they all have, into the battlefield triggers, which should be really, really good for this list. Enduring Courage. This is another card that I think has gone under the radar for a lot of people, but it's very similar to some cards we've had in the past. It's 4 mana for a 3/3, and whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield, it gets +2/+0 and gains haste until end of turn. Then when this dies, it comes back as an enchantment. You have that ability forever. Now, the reason this is important in this deck is if you do manage to get off a Smuggler Surprise, then if this comes down with any of your other stuff, those things have haste and can just get in immediately, and that's going to make it easier to end the games. It's also a 3/3 body, so worst case scenario, if you're in one of those situations, say against an aggro deck where you just need to slow them down for a second, you can still just throw this out as a 3/3 for the turn, block, it dies, it comes back, and then you're still set up to do whatever silly thing you want to do the next turn, and all your stuff has haste and +2. Not even just haste, they're already big and they get to be even bigger, which means if they connect, they probably will end the game. So yeah, this has a lot of value in this deck. Now, the card that I had kind of like pushed to the side, realized when Yeoman was playing it in his list, this makes a lot of sense because I already wanted to play Brotherhoods in. And guess what? Overgrown Zealot is a colorless and a green for a 0/4. That means it doesn't die to Brotherhoods in. So you can still play this early as a blocker or for advancing your mana. And then on turn 3 or 4, as you need to get rid of the board, you go ahead and Brotherhoods in, and you're still ready to rock and roll the next turn. So this card's really sweet. It produces a mana of any color. It technically can produce 2 mana to turn something face up, but I don't think we have a way to make anything face down. So unless the opponent gives us a manifest thing cool, then we'll get to use it. But otherwise, not likely. We just want it here for the mana ramp and to be able to block stuff and to survive Brotherhoods in. And it does all those things well. Now, talking about Overlords, we get to play Overlord of the Boiler Bilges. Now, the best thing about this is it also gives the deck another removal spell. And if you remember, earlier versions were playing the Carnosaur, right? That we could pay 3, discard it from our hand, deal 3 damage to something. This is 1 more mana, but it deals 4, and it's 4 to any target. So if we want to hit a Planeswalker, we want to hit an opponent, we can do that. And it'll just be ready to go as a 5/5 in a couple of turns, which is great. So your board gets swept, you have a 5/5 waiting in the wings to hit the battlefield. But if you just get to play this off of a Smuggler Surprise, well, then it straight up just comes down and deals 4, and you have a 5/5, right? Just a really good card overall. We also get to play Overlord of the Hauntwoods. Now, I'm only playing 3 of each of these, and it's arguable you could play 4 of the green one, just so you can advance your mana still. I think that could be a really good idea here, obviously. But I have 3 and 3 right now in this list. But this is also very good, right? It just produces more mana. It's a 6/5 body. It's fairly easy to cast at 5 mana, even if you just want to straight up play it and start attacking with it. If you don't have anything else to do, then it does a pretty good job of mana ramp. For 3 mana, you just get a token that's every land, right? So you're still on pace to do everything you want to do throughout the turns with this deck, or with this card. So I don't have a problem with it being in here just for impending, but realistically, we might just cast this and beat down with it, and that works for me. Of course, we're still playing Terror of the Peaks because why not? We just added a 6 power thing and a 5 power thing, right? This is going to do exactly what you want it to do. The crazy thing is, again, when we're talking about playing this with Enduring Courage, though, now those things come down. They're also bigger. You get that +2 trigger onto them as well. So now you get to do that damage, and you get a haste creature, right? So this is actually a pretty wild scenario that you can set up now. And we basically made this deck significantly more powerful than it was in its previous version just because we get both utility creatures and creatures of size all in kind of one big go. And we are playing some Tranquil Fback main. This is a thing, and I'm playing 2 copies here, but kind of as a catch-all thing, right? It gains us some life against the aggro matches. It's a 3/3 body if we need it to be, and it removes graveyards. We know that Delirium's going to be a thing, so stuff that removes graveyards is going to be very important. It actually can get rid of artifacts and enchantments because there's going to be a lot of enchantments. Some of those enchantments are going to be creatures, so it might even be creature removal. It's arguable that the value for Tranquil Fback from a player standpoint, you know, might, or utility standpoint, might be as high as it's ever going to be, at least for the next 12 to 18 months, while enchantments are still a thing floating around in a lot of these deck lists. So it's going to be hard not to want to play this card if you have access to it, honestly. But again, we were just talking about it. Brotherhood's in. You know, it's a way to get rid of small problematic artifacts, but also sweep the board, right? We know there's still going to be other versions of mono red running around. The Boros deck gets a new convoke creature, you know, some other little spells that help them out. The green red aggro stuff gets a couple of spells that help that list out. And of course, there's still mice, there's still rabbits, right? Those aren't going away. So this is a card you definitely want to play. I have 3 copies in here right now, but if you wanted to find a way for a 4th because you're missing some of the other cards, I think that's a totally reasonable thing to do and it wouldn't be crazy. Glimpse the Core. We need some other ways to ramp. This is a 2-mana spell. We don't have a ton of fabulous 2-mana things to do, so this fills this spot just fine. And, you know, our whole goal here, as you can see, really is get our ramp stuff out there, you know, whether it's the Overlord of the Hauntwoods, whether it's Glimpse the Core, you know, just do what we can, you know, with the Overgrown Zealot, just get those things out there, buy the time, get the mana up, and then just try to go off. Because this is a situation where what we've rolled into is that even if we don't get off a Smuggler Surprise, which is the next card here, we can actually just play our cards and they are significant on their own. And I'd even argue that there's probably going to be a lot of times in here where if your mana's a little weird, don't think you have to sit on Smuggler Surprise until you get all the instant speed value out of it. If you have to during their end step, just go hunt for 2 lands off the top of your deck. Hit the rest of your land drops and then just start dropping your fatties on time. Because otherwise, you might fall too far behind waiting for that 5th, that 6th mana, and you're just not going to get around to casting it. So get your big creatures out there and go for it. Because remember, not only are you getting creatures, these are creatures that come with abilities attached that are great, right? One of our new big creatures makes mana. The other one is actually going to be removing threats. So it might remove a threat and block a threat, right? So you want to get to where you can just cast those straight up if you have to. And then kind of rounding things out spell-wise, we do have some Torch the Tower. And this is sort of just a concession to we got to be able to deal with early creatures. But since we don't have really a pile of ways to make tokens, really, I would argue, well, I guess artifacts, or what else can we get rid of for bargain? Artifacts, enchantments, or tokens. So I guess we get rid of our land if we don't need it. That's a thing. So maybe occasionally we'll get to do 3 with this. But if not, if that's a concern for you, there's nothing wrong with going ahead and playing Shock or Lightning Strike or whatever in this spot. I think it's totally reasonable. But got to have something for those early matchups, or you're probably going to die to just getting run down. So you got to have something. Because while we do have some early blockers and we do have Brotherhoods in, sometimes you just don't get to them, right? So having a little bit of redundancy there to protect yourself is actually a good thing. And as we talked about in one of our previous videos, or maybe, I don't know, the order you're watching these, the Verge lands. I'm going to keep having this conversation every time they come up in deck lists, but if you were going to play any number of basics, right? And in this list, because of the lands that exist, we were probably going to play like probably initially going to play like 6 forest and 4 mountains or something. You have no problem just cutting out some mountains to go ahead and play Thornspire Verge. You could argue that maybe even you cut 1 forest to play it, but realistically, replace any basics you were going to play with this. Not all of them, but maybe half of them, right? Because it's always going to be a mountain plus. It's never going to be worse than a mountain. It comes into play untapped. So if I was willing to play some number of mountains, I might as well play this. And then because we are playing some forests and some mountains, then great. Occasionally it's going to produce another color. Additionally, if you're playing any of the Surveill lands from Karlov Manor, then you actually have lands that count as 2 basic land types. So you get one of these out turn 1, then you play your Thornspire Verge on 2, and then there you go. You have 2 lands that produce red and green, and you're off to the races to do whatever you want. It's kind of that simple. So yeah, just something to think about in your mana. Yes, it is a rare land. Yes, you're going to have to spend some cards crafting them. But I expect you're going to play these quite a lot, especially if they're in color combinations you like to play already. We all know our personal preferences, so if it fits what you like to do, go ahead and craft them. I don't think you're going to be too upset about it. But again, don't forget, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Keep an eye out for all the things we have coming for Duskmourn, because there's a lot of stuff coming down the pipe. Also, we just did our underrated cards video, so you should check that out as well. That's up. And just a ton of other things already for Duskmourn. It has actually been a crazy time, and it's going to continue. But yeah, don't forget, like, subscribe, check out the other videos if you want more deck ideas before the set goes live. That's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.